everyone. This is the January edition of HR Hot Topics, and I'm your host, Jody Schaefer. As always, we aim to make this the most informative 5 minutes of your month. This month, we are talking vaccines. I know we've been talking vaccines for the last few episodes, but I'm going to shift from can I mandate to instead what I think is more real for all of you is if I'm not comfortable mandating, which most of my clients are not, how do I instead encourage staff to get the vaccine voluntarily? For those of you who watch the news as a society, in order to reach herd immunity, in other words, the percentage of us that need to be protected against COVID or immune to COVID in order for the pandemic to subside is at least 70% of our populations, 200 million people. And that's on the low end. The percentage could actually be higher than that. So it's incumbent upon all of us to do our research, to really look at some evidence-based factual information and then make some informed decisions for ourselves about whether or not the vaccine is right for us. And as employers, there's obviously an upside to having your staff and yourself get vaccinated. There are business implications, there are health implications, right? And again, just this idea that we would love to get back to a day where we can have some semblance of normalcy. So how do you combat fear and hesitation and misinformation around the vaccine? And your staff might be looking to you to provide some of those answers. And so what I've done is spent a lot of time doing my own research so that I could share with you some of what I have found out, the things that I think would be most helpful. Now, I've written a full article on this that is completely footnoted with all of my resources, and I will refer you to that. It's in the body of the email that's attached to this video. But I'm just going to hit the highlights for you around 3 key concerns that I keep hearing over and over. So the first concern has to do with the speed at which this vaccine was developed and brought to market. And the fear is if it was brought to market so fast, can it possibly be safe, right? Or were there steps that were skipped? And I just want to make sure that all of your staff understand the things that go into bringing a vaccine to market. There's the development of the vaccine and the testing of the vaccine. Those are the safety pieces. But there's a whole other piece to bringing a vaccine to market that's much more administrative. It has to do with funding, manufacturing, and the distribution logistics. And so prior to the Pfizer vaccine, which was the first vaccine approved for use here in the US, prior to that, the fastest vaccine that was brought to market took 4 years. Now, as of the taping of this episode, the current death count in the US related to COVID is 365,000 people, and it continues to climb every single day. We don't have 4 years to wait for a vaccine. And so the federal government dumped billions of dollars into Operation Warp Speed, which not a great name, by the way, because it doesn't exactly infuse confidence around safety and efficacy, but that was the name that was provided. And really the goal of Operation Warp Speed was to remove any of the barriers that would unintentionally slow down the process. So it's not as though they were trying to fast track science, but it was more the funding, the manufacturing, and the distribution logistics that they wanted to streamline. And it's made a huge difference. The other thing that's really helped fast track this vaccine is the way in which it's produced. It uses messenger RNA, which can be more easily produced in a lab setting. And it also is using research that was already created for another virus that was very similar to this coronavirus. So our scientists weren't starting from scratch on this. Another big piece here is that we started full-scale manufacturing of the vaccine simultaneous to the clinical testing, knowing that if the clinical testing didn't vet out to the safety and efficacy standards of the FDA, that would all be wasted money on the manufacturing side. But a lot of the government funding, not so much for Pfizer, but for Moderna and some of the other ones, the government was going to eat that cost. So it was a financial risk, but it wasn't a product risk. And luckily for all of us, Pfizer and Moderna both showed extremely favorable efficacy, and safety. So it wasn't wasted money. And as soon as the green light was given at the FDA level, the vaccine was already produced and ready for distribution. So those are just some things that led to a much more expedited timeline. And it wasn't as though steps were skipped in the development and the safety piece. Another common thing that I hear a lot is skepticism over the type of vaccine. So both Moderna and Pfizer use messenger RNA to deliver what's called a spike protein to your cell, but that messenger RNA does not interact with the DNA of the cell. It never interacts with the nucleus in the cell, so it can't be replicated within the body. It simply tricks the body. That protein tricks the body into saying, wait a minute, this doesn't belong here. And then the body launches an immune response and creates antibodies, which is what protects you from the actual virus. That's very different from how traditional vaccines work. Traditional vaccines introduce a weakened or dead version of the full virus into your body to create the immune response. So in a lot of ways, messenger RNA vaccines are faster to produce. You don't need the full genetic code for the virus in order to do it. And the safety standards would indicate that they are no less safe than a traditional vaccine. And we'll wait to see, they could potentially be more safe because the actual virus is not being introduced into the system in order to create the response. So while this is a novel method to creating vaccines, it's not new. mRNA vaccines have been around for decades, and a lot of research has been put into how we can use messenger RNA to create the kind of autoimmune or the immune response that we're looking for. And so again, it was all that research and decades of, just combined effort worldwide on that also led to the expedited timeline on this because we didn't have to start from scratch. The third thing that I hear a lot is, okay, but this is new, and so we don't know the long-term health effects of getting the vaccine. And you know what? That's true. That is absolutely true. Now, because of the type of vaccine that's being put out with Pfizer and Moderna and the fact that they're using messenger RNA, that messenger RNA does not live in the body long. The body just dissolves it within hours to days. So the science at this point would indicate that if there were going to be severe reactions, you would expect to see those within the first few months of getting the vaccine. And we've had clinical trials going on at least that long now, and we've not seen that. But we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so you're absolutely right to be a little bit hesitant about that. But let me put that in comparison to something that we also don't know. We also don't know what the long-term risks of contracting COVID will be. But what we do know is terrifying. Long hauler syndrome is real. So when you compare getting a vaccine, which might result in, site pain, injection site pain, redness, swelling, maybe a low-grade fever, all very temporary. When you compare that to the symptoms of COVID, even if you have a mild or moderate case of COVID, right, it's an imbalanced scale. COVID's symptoms are much more severe. They last longer. And even if you had a mild or moderate condition, there's no telling how that's going to affect your body long term. And for the ones that we do know, there are absolutely cases of long haulers where it's leading to organ damage. We're talking like major organs, heart, brain, lungs, okay, blood clots, brain fog, difficulty with memory, and as I said, death. 365,000 Americans have lost their lives to this. So yeah, it's true. Every vaccine, right, carries some degree of risk, but I think that risk is worth taking when you compare it against the alternative. Now, the choice is up to all of you, but I would highly encourage you to share some of this information with your staff, especially if these concerns are brought forward. I think we all need to do our part here to encourage vaccination. The more people that get vaccinated, the more people are willing to be vaccinated. So it sort of is this slow rolling thing, but that's really our goal right now. We need to create and to maintain a healthy, viable workforce, this is one of the ways we're going to do it. So I'm going to encourage you, take a look at the article, follow those footnotes, do the research for yourself, but do not be afraid to talk with your staff about this. The hesitations, the concerns, the fears, they're very real, but there's a lot of information out there that I think that could combat some of the things that are unfounded. And I'd encourage you all to do your part in that. So with that, I'll leave you. Stay safe, okay? Join us next month for our February edition. Next month, I'm really excited. I'm going to be introducing a new team member to the HRM team, and her name is Ann Hall. We can't wait for you all to meet her. So we'll see you next month. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can reach me directly, Jody Schaefer at workwithhrm.com.